Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast. The show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Joining me today is a Cuban-born American musician, songwriter, hard rock, heavy metal bassist that has played with Quiet Riot, Ozzy Osbourne, Whitesnake, Dio, Blue Oyster Cult, and the Guess Who, along with others. He is the author of Off the Rails, Aboard the Crazy Train in the Blizzard of Oz. He plays bass, guitar, keyboard, synthesizer, is a vocalist, an avid computer digital animator, an animal rights activist, the host of 6 Degrees of Sarzo at Monster Rock Radio, 4 decades as a recording and touring musician, and 6 decades with the bass. His recordings combined have sold over 35 million copies. Please welcome to the show, Rudy Sarzo. Rudy, how are you?
Hey, Tommy, I'm blessed. You know what? I love the little theme song that you have. It's really happy.
Thank you. Thank you.
It says heavy metal and Ozzy Osbourne and Dio, that theme song. That is...
Nobody's ever mentioned the music, so that really, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I'm a musician. You know, I have this problem that if, let's say, I'm having a conversation and a song shows up, you know, my ear just gravitates towards the music.
That's cool.
And I don't hear the words anymore. You know, I don't hear the conversation anymore. You know, it's weird.
Rudy, let's start here. Speak regarding growing up in Havana, Cuba, before you immigrated to the U.S. in 1961.
Tell you about that? You know, it was, it's funny. It's a really good question because, you know, it's not just growing up in Havana in 1950s. It was 1950. I don't think you're old enough to have been around in the 50s, but if I talk to somebody who was around in the 50s, we're going to talk about a whole different world. Mm-hmm. Whether you are in Cuba or in the United States or in Europe, it was completely different. You know, of course, we didn't have the situation that you have in the United States. If you're talking to somebody about the 50s in the United States, is within years, not even a decade. I was born 5 years after the end of World War II. It's a whole different world. Mm-hmm. It's rebuilding the world, basically, you know. And of course, Cuba not being part of the United States, even though there were some Cubans that actually fought in World War II, but it wasn't like the United States, you know, people getting drafted and joining and going over there. So there was not that much of a sense of rebuilding cultural and society in Cuba as there was in the United States. You know, of course, there was a surge of industrial revolution going in the United States, the auto manufacturing, building the suburbs, you know, of all the military coming back and moving the outskirts and building those communities and populating the United States. Not everybody returned to the big cities. People were going on the outskirts. That was the evolution of the suburbs. Well, in Cuba, we really didn't have too many suburbs. I lived right smack in the middle of Havana, you know, so I grew up in a little big city.
Gotcha.
Havana. It was pretty big. It was our version of a big city.
What type of music then did you grow up with? Well,
that's another interesting question because, you know, Cuban music is very influenced by world music, and our world music, part of our world music was American music. You know? Yeah. You know, because we were Cuban. So, you know, somebody in the United States might listen to Cuban music and say, oh, that's world music. Well, where we come from, American music is world music to us because it's foreign music, you know. I would say the traditional Cuban music is a fusion of classical music and Afro. They call it Afro-Cuban. Okay. But it's really African, you know. So it's a fusion of that. A lot of polyrhythms. It wasn't until later on when big bands, you know, big orchestras started incorporating, in addition to the percussion section, you know, congas and timbales and everything else that they brought in, which was African influenced percussion. They brought in the drums. That was very rare. That was mostly the Cuban jazz bands.
Okay.
In the tradition of like Dizzy Gillespie, when he infused jazz with Latin music, that was kind of like the birth of Latin jazz. Popularized by Dizzy Gillespie. Yeah, Duke Ellington was touching on that, way back before Dizzy Gillespie with his like Caravan. That's a big Latin influence song written by a Latino. I believe he was Puerto Rican. Yeah, and his Duke Ellington's trombone player. So yeah, Latin, Cuban music was a blend of a lot of things. Like, me growing up in the 50s, we got television just about the same time as the United States did, because Cuba became an extension of the United States, kind of like what Puerto Rico is, except that we were only 90 miles away. So people actually could take a ferry from Key West to Havana and get out of their cars and start driving around. And then come back home the same way. So sure. It wasn't like you had to take a long flight, because Puerto Rico, it's a pretty long flight. It's about maybe 4 hours, as I recall, because I've taken that flight, depending where you're flying from, either New York. I usually fly from Miami. So it is that long of a flight. And so it was a lot of the American culture really, was embraced and accepted. And another thing, Cuba was really culturally as diverse as the United States. There was all these different cultural and diversity. We have Chinese who actually fled communist China, wound up in Cuba. That when Castro came in, they were the first one to leave because they knew exactly what communism was. And so they told my parents, our Chinese friends, told us, "Hey, listen, you better get out of here because we've been through this. We're out. We're gone." So that was a good warning they gave my family. And there was the Jewish sector, Italians, you name it. There was a Polacks. As a matter of fact, the Jewish sector was mostly Polish Jews who came during World War II and to Cuba. And as soon as they arrived, they set up the same businesses they had in Poland. As a matter of fact, my Cubans used to call Jewish people Polacks, los Polacos, because that's where they were from. We never really, say, oh, they're Jewish or whatever, whatever, their views of religion were. Because, Cuban being mostly predominantly Catholic, but then there is this, Judeo-Christianity, that really is commingles, and it's really embraced. So, everybody just lived, cohabitated,
Rudy, was the bass the first instrument you learned? And if so, who taught you? And if that wasn't, what was the first instrument you started to learn to play?
In high school, we really didn't have like rock bands or anything like that. It's when I was in high school, it was in the 60s. I'm 70 years old. So I went, the Beatles came. I was 13 years old when 1964. And that was kind of like what really started getting me into music as a vehicle to get girls. That was it. There was no other motivation.
I get it.
Because I saw the Beatles and Ed Sullivan, and so did all the guys that I play with, And it was the same motivation. We saw the girls screaming at the Beatles, and we wanted that. And we thought this is the easy way to get it. We're just gonna learn 3 chords, play these easy songs. Like, they're not easy, but I didn't know any better, But prior to that, I was basically in the high school, elementary school, high school marching band. But I wasn't really much into that. I wasn't really that much into playing a trumpet or playing a trombone because you just can't. you just can't pull chicks with a trombone.
It's not as sexy as the guitar.
Yeah. It's like I do these events called Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, and I have my own radio show, 6 Degrees of Sarzo on Monster Rock Radio. But so in Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp, there's always special guests coming. So there was one time there was Jack Bruce. I don't know if Jack Bruce being the bass player for Cream and all of that. So he's a huge influence on all of us bass players, of that era. So I asked him, how did you transcend from being a cello player? And this is during an interview where everybody was watching for the whole Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp. It wasn't just a one-on-one hanging on in the hallway. It was just in front of all these people. I asked him during an interview, how did you, go from being such a cello player to becoming such an influential bass player? And he says it's because you can't pull chicks with a cello. That's exactly what he told me. So I'm not alone in this.
No, there's probably a long line behind you too, for sure.
I think everybody is in the line.
Rudy, did the early garage bands shape you then to where you are today?
Yes, I'll tell you. Absolutely. Not only that, it just reshaped everything about me. It's when that period of the Beatles coming in and my parents got my brother and me, because, we were refugees, so we didn't have a whole lot of money, but my parents were, they would do anything to please us, And so my brother and I, we wanted to play guitar. So they got us one guitar from Spiegel catalog, mail order, which now 50, 60 years later, it's the popular way to buy instruments. Mail order,
yeah,
through the internet, So we're going back full circle.
Full circle.
And so we get this one guitar, and we're just learning on our own. I mean, my parents didn't have money to get us lessons, so it was kind of like I heard something on the radio, and of course I didn't know anything about the concept of tuning. I thought if the string is tight enough, it's in tune. Nobody explained anything to me. Okay, so I'm basically playing on one or two strings that kind of like sound like, oh, okay, these two strings sound good together, And I would hear things on the radio and try to emulate that. So I really did not have a proper education in how to play chords or structure or the cage system or nothing. Okay, so fast forward, my parents leave New Jersey, because we were relocated to New Jersey after we landed in Miami 2 years later. By 63, we were in Jersey, and then by 66, we were back in Miami again. So I go down to the garage where in the neighborhood that we moved in, and there was a band practicing. And I bring my guitar and I go, hi, I'm Rudy. I'm new in the neighborhood. I want to join your band. And they go, well, we got too many guitar players. But if you want to join the band, you can play the bass. And I go, what's that? They say, well, it's kind of like playing a guitar solo throughout the whole song. And I went, that's me right there. And that's how I got bamboozled into playing the bass.
And 6 decades later, still playing the bass.
You know what? I just love the bass. I mean, now during COVID, I've been reconnecting with the guitar, with the 6-string guitar. But you know what? After playing for so many years, I'm so used to playing with my fingers. I really suck at the pick. I'm not as good of, even though I have my own line of picks. Here we go.
Oh, that's cool.
Line of picks, but it's because I record with a pick a lot. So I'm okay sitting down. I'm sitting down and I'm just like concentrating and I'm playing. Okay, that's good. But you put me on stage, try to perform with a pick, forget about it. I can't. It's a whole different experience. So I put the pick away and I play with my fingers.
Rudy, my question is, when did it go from rock to metal?
It's always been metal.
Well, that's kind of what I thought, but somewhere in there, it transitioned to all of a sudden it had its own genre.
Yeah, you know what? I think it had to do mostly with the amplification. I think really, I mean, the Beatles on recordings and Jeff Beck a little bit getting feedback. I mean, the feedback, you get feedback when things are too loud and the pickups are too close to the tube. So it starts feeding back and getting feedback through the speakers. When you put the pickup on the speakers and the tubes are resonating and all of that. Okay, having said that, the one that really made sense of it was Jimi Hendrix. And that, I was there when it happened. That's when we all went, wow, check that out. Because before, if you played like that, I was like, oh, no, turn down. You sound too dirty. You sound distorted. That's no good. That's bad. Because you really couldn't play Motown or play, any of the songs on the radio. And I'm talking the 60s. Let me put into perspective the way things were recorded. They had a certain clarity to it. They were not saturated, distorted. You would hear saturation on blues records. Okay, but that was allowed because it was the blues, But in pop music, which is what our top 40 playlist that we would play at party bands, especially a lot of Motown, a lot of King, or a lot of like Memphis Stax records. It was, Steve Cropper, very clean, not a whole lot of distortion, and which was good for the bass because it meant that the bass was not going to get buried with all the distorted,
makes sense.
Guitars. Yeah, saturation coming. It's just the frequencies were more shelved back then. So, you could pick out everything, all the instruments, the Beatles, they really flirted with heavy metal, songs like Helter Skelter, but it had a purpose. It was a sound that went along with the song. It was conceptual. It wasn't like, let's say, a band called Blue Cheer, that they were kind of like the first version of Motorhead, basically.
Okay.
They were just as loud as you could get, and as thrashy as you could get. And they recorded like that, just for that effect, And then, because even if you listen to the Who early records, they're more like R&B records than metal records. It wasn't until later on that it evolved into that. A lot of it might have to do with the fact that Pete Townsend was losing his hearing. So he kept turning up. John Entwistle, he was a buddy of mine. I mean, he was a friend to a lot of musicians in LA, especially in the 80s, because, he spent a lot of time in Los Angeles and he hung out and he was a great hang, no airs of, hi, I'm John Entwistle of the Who. He was just another musician hanging out with you, And the last gig I did in the same bill, it was John Entwistle's solo artist. I gotta tell you, it was so freaking loud, and he still could not hear because by then he was deaf. It was pretty much deaf, and he had cranked. He played beautifully. That never affected his playing, but it affected his hearing. And when your hearing is affected, your tone is affected too, because you're trying to overcompensate what you don't hear, so you might turn up more treble just to hear that frequency. And whereas to the person with average hearing might hear that tone and go, oh my God, that it's not only is it loud, but it's so trebly. There's no bass tone. Also, drugs like cocaine have an effect on the hearing. They do. They close down certain blood flow to your ear, so your ears get muffled. You stop losing your highs, and everything gets really low, muffled like that.
Gets
right?
real muffled.
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, if you listen to some late 70s, early 80s mixes, you could tell when the mixing engineer was doing cocaine because it sounds like a frying pan, like sizzle, a lot of sizzle going on, no low end. I mean, we can talk about this forever.
Right. What does it take to be a professional musician? Not just, I mean, there's musicians, but then there's the professional musician.
Well, there's the professional identity. You identify not only you, but people perception of you as a professional, which to me, without that, you don't have a career.
Agree.
And, first of all, yeah, it's a given. You have to know your instrument. A lot of people know their instruments. A lot of people are educated. A lot of people are really qualified to be a professional musician. Not everybody has the trust factor. The trust factor being that you're dependable. If you're in my band, I can trust that you're going to play correctly. You're not going to show up, under the influence of whatever on stage. You're not going to be a casualty. You're not going to be a detriment to the band at the venue. You are a representative of the artist or the band or even the venue. I do a lot of casinos. I'm a current member of the Guess Who. And the moment I walk in that door of that, let's say we're staying in the hotel, the casino is attached to the hotel, I am a representative. I carry my weight that I am kind to everybody. I mean, I usually am kind, but I take that, it's like, it's this. I represent the band. I'm even representing the venue because the venue is hiring the band to play here.
Correct.
And it goes all the way to the moment that I come home. And
That's
then
awesome.
I do it all over again.
That's great.
It's like we do a lot of Epcot centers in Orlando. We do a residency every year. And the band is considered cast members. We come through the cast member door. We come, we are cast members. We are representing the Epcot Center, this new world,
That's great advice. You've played with some of the very best guitar players. Who has awed you where you just went like, wow?
Well, it's with time, it's different things all about people, all me about certain musicians, not just guitar players, just musicians in general. The more I am exposed or play with people that awe me, it's harder to awe me.
Sure.
I've been there, seen that, done that.
Sure.
But there's always room, and sometimes it's younger musicians. The maturity of younger musicians that really impress me. And again, mentioning during the rock and roll fantasy camp, we sometimes get a lot of they're not even teens yet. They're like they're 9 years old, 10 years old, and just because there's so much information being shared online, YouTube, and I take advantage of this. There's a lot of free lessons and free information. Now I see a lot of young people kind of like playing with so much fluidity and maturity. But to me, the most important music that any musician could ever play is the music that comes from you. So yeah, it would be, I would be impressed to see somebody that's 10 years old playing Van Halen, playing Randy Rhodes, playing Steve Vai, you name it. The list, we can go on and on. But the fact is, I would be even more impressed to hear their own compositions at the level of Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhodes or Steve Vai and everybody else.
Touring the world has its challenges, and you've toured the world many times. Did you ever get tired of it, or did you just always embrace the tour?
No, the biggest challenge touring the whole world, which is getting easier, is finding a Starbucks. I call it the American Embassy. Now, having said that, Starbucks is not really my favorite coffee. Actually, Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf.
Okay.
They're not as world, there's not as many. I wish there were as many as Starbucks, but they're not. So I just say Starbucks because they're just about everywhere.
How many times were you with Quiet Riot? Because there were several.
Several. Okay, first time in the 70s. I was there from 78 to 79 when Randy left to join Ozzy. Then I returned See, in between that Quiet Riot and the Mental Health Quiet Riot, there was a band called Dubrow that Kevin Dubrow put together to continue his songwriting and singing and performing. But it was a revolving door. At that time, the industry in Los Angeles was concentrating mostly on the new wave and punk style of music. So,
okay.
There were bands just waiting in the green rooms, such as Dubrow that turned into Quiet Riot. You have Motley Crue, you have Great White, you have Rat, Doc, and those bands that were from the Sunset Strip, but they were just kind of like waiting for something to happen. No guarantee. We have no idea. We didn't have the crystal ball to say, oh yeah, just stick around for about 3-4 years and you get your turn. No. As a matter of fact, it was the opposite. The labels were telling us, hey, you guys are playing dinosaur music. If you don't play punk or new wave, you aren't going to get signed, And everybody, I was in my mid-20s. All the other guys were in early 20s, So it was tough. It was very tough.
When you join a legacy band such as Ozzy, Whitesnake, the list goes on, which you've been with.
Yeah.
How fast do you have to put in the time to learn those songs that they're going to be performing?
Yeah. Well, you know what? That is a great question. I'm going to answer that and then finish how many times I was in Quiet Riot.
Okay.
It's part of that question. Okay. Whatever. It's eternal. You are a musician. I play all the time. If I wasn't doing this with you, I would be playing or doing or mixing something. So music, this is what I do. And like I mentioned, growing up without having to afford lessons or money to buy records, I listened to the radio when I wanted to learn a song. Now, if you were playing top 40 music, it means that song you want to learn is going to get played maybe every hour because every song was short. It was 2.5 minutes long. So top 40 could consist of like a 2 or 3 hour rotation on the one radio stations that's playing rock and roll in your city, And then that's AM. Then FM came, and then FM was playing deep cuts, and all of this stuff like Frank Zappa and the Fugs, which you were not going to be playing that at your team dance. That's for your listening pleasure. And so I had to learn really fast just to learn songs by ear. That's it, because let's say I'm playing with a band at a party and we're doing Midnight Hour. Well, Midnight Hour is going to get played 4 times this afternoon. I'm going to sit by radio with my bass and learn it every time it comes on. So by the weekend, I already know the song. So I developed this ability to transcribe by ear really, really quickly. It was a matter of survival. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You know what? It's just basically everything that it has to do with my life. And I call this the sperm mode. Sperm mode. All of us, you, me, everybody, once we were sperms. We were the one that beat millions of other sperms to get in there. Right? So we got it in us to do it. If we need to, we have to. We got to get in there. But you just have to turn on your sperm mode switch.
I've never heard that, but I'm going to start using it.
Yeah, that's it. Just go in sperm mode. Yeah, I've done things in my life that people ask me, oh my God, how did you ever do that? Sperm mode. I had to do it. It's either you get it done or you're going to be history. Somebody else is going to do it. Another sperm is going to get in there.
Before I go to the next question, I do need to do a special shout out to all my Patreon members and my new Patreon member, Ralph Delegati, a former guest. Ralph, thank you for joining the BTL crew. Also, special shout out to Jeff Haraney out of Ohio, Craig Barlow, another former guest and a PGA Tour veteran, Missy Meidel out of Illinois, David Thiel out of Vegas, and Brett Giuliano from Chicago, and Dust Bunny Mafia. So you guys, thank you for being part of the BTL crew. Rudy, back to you. You had a great friendship with Randy Rhodes.
Yes.
What did you learn from Randy?
I learned a lot, which takes me back to what I'm trying to continue. Me and the times in Quiet Riot. Okay, 1978 to 79 with Randy Rhodes. I came back for it was that I played with Dubrell for a little bit right before I joined Ozzy. Then I joined Ozzy. Then I come back and I went in to do just as a session. I was still a member of Ozzy. Kevin asked me to come in just to do one song for a possible record that they're working on because they weren't signed yet. And it was Thunderbird, which is one of the songs that the song that Kevin wrote when Randy left Quiet Riot. So that, that's in the Mental Health record. That was the first song that I did for the album. I played, except for 2 songs, I played on the whole record. But I was, when I went in to do the session, I was still a member of Ozzy. Okay. So just bullet point. I rejoined Quiet Riot. Now it's called, Quiet Riot, known as the Mental Health version of the band. So I leave in 1985, and then in 97. Oh wait, hold on. There's a brief moment in time that I sneezed, and I was a member of Quiet Riot and Whitesnake at the same time. Right? So, because I got a call from Frankie, this is 1987, and Frankie goes, listen, Kevin is out of the band, and, we want to see if you want to return, and blah, blah, blah. And I go, Quiet Riot is the band that I was there, with the Randy version, and then I was there, the Mental Health version, when we were driving around ourselves and rented station wagons and then RVs, opening up for ZZ Top and Loverboy, and then we went to number 1. It's really my home. This is the house that we built together as a band, and it will always have that place in my heart. So when I was asked to, go back, and I said, sure. And I told Frankie, but listen, I'm committed to this Whitesnake tour, because at the time it was only a 6-week tour worth of dates. And I made, opening up for Motley Crue in 1987, Whitesnake. And I made the commitment. It says, I can't back out on that. I've never done that. I never will. So he says, okay, we'll do is we'll rehearse with you in the evenings and you rehearse with Whitesnake in the afternoons. Okay, fine and dandy. I did that for about a week. And then I was on my bicycle working out before a Whitesnake, actually before a Quiet Riot rehearsal, and I got hit by a car, and I almost died. And I wind up in a cast, and I could not do both rehearsals. And I told Frankie, listen, I'm going to go on tour, and with a cast on, and I made a commitment. I got to do this. And, and then when we come back, when I'm done with this tour, I'll continue. So he said, okay. And what happened was that I had been doing the rehearsals with the new version of Quiet Riot and without Kevin. And maybe I wasn't there long enough to get used to it, not having Kevin and having somebody else singing, that it was like, I was beginning to question, if it was going to be a good move. And then I go on tour with Whitesnake, and I started feeling at home.
Makes sense.
It was like, I wanted to go back home with Quiet Riot, but without Kevin, it just didn't feel like home.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, it does.
And I had to make one of the hardest calls I have ever made was to call Frankie and say, listen, I'm going to stay with Whitesnake here. I feel really comfortable. And he understood, because it was like the band exploded really, really quick, And but then in 1997, we reunited all the 4 original Mental Health members. And we were reunited until 2003. And then that broke up. And then Frankie and Kevin continued with Quiet Riot until Kevin passed.
Okay.
You answer.
Yeah, we got it.
Now, about Randy teaching me, he taught me a lot. Well, first of all, he mostly taught me how to play the auditions. My audition songs for the Ozzy audition were Crazy Train and I Don't Know. And, you know, everybody probably has that record in their collection. Back in 1981, the record wasn't even out yet in LA. And so he comes over, plays me the record, and shows me the song because I got an audition in an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then again, I have to retain it. You know, what I just learned, you know. Okay, that's good. But prior to that, prior to Randy joining Quiet Riot, he used to teach at his mom's music school called Musonia in North Hollywood, still there. And so one day he asked me to become a bass teacher. And I said, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And even though I had gone to college and studied music, I didn't know how to teach. That's a whole different gift, you know. It can be learned, but, you know, you have to get it from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And of course, Randy got it from his mom, who was a teacher. So she handed down this teaching techniques and genes too, because it's genetic, I guess, you know, that willingness to pass information. And so Randy taught me how to teach.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Is it correct? Did you really go from sleeping on a floor to living with Ozzy and Sharon?
Yes.
That is true.
Sleeping on a sheet on the floor. I had a sheet. It was a Flash Gordon sheet. Kind of like, like kids. Like
yeah.
Kids.
I remember Flash Gordon.
Pads. Flash Gordon sheet. I'll never forget that. Yeah.
And how did the invite then come? Did it come through Randy to join Ozzy?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I had no resume. I had nothing, no credentials, nothing. I was the guy sleeping on the floor who had played with Randy in Quiet Riot. But you know, the trust factor came into play because Randy knew that I could be trusted to not be a bad influence on Ozzy.
That's a whole different podcast.
That was easy. That's like, I mean, who can be a bad influence on him, you know? So, okay, I passed that. But, you know, to learn the songs, you know, be reliable, be a good hang in the bus because we're all traveling together on one bus, you know, one tour bus. You know, all these things that make a professional musician professional, you know.
Sure. You toured with Ozzy on the Blizzard of Oz and Diary of Madman tours. Did you lose your joy of playing after Randy passed? And if so, how did you get it back?
I've lost it a few times, and it always finds its way because you have to seek it in order to find it again. How did I get it back was, well, after Randy died, you know, we had to go back on tour. And it was, nothing had changed except Randy wasn't there. He wasn't playing. Randy was not there. So there was a huge hole in our lives. It's not like the hole has been filled. It's just that we learned how to live with it.
Did you guys ever think about stopping the tour, Rudy?
Well, no. Because the reality was that if Ozzy would have gone home, he would have drunk himself to death or drugs. Man. You know. So that was not an option. The option was to keep him occupied. As a matter of fact, you can actually watch this on YouTube. In between the time that Randy died and we started auditioning guitar players and going to services for Randy and Rachel, who also died on the plane crash, and the time that we went back on tour, that was about 10 days, not even 2 weeks. Sharon had Ozzy go on and not cancel a David Letterman interview. And you can find that on YouTube. And that's fresh within days after the crash. It was bad enough. It was horrific enough that our guitar player and friend and, you know, brother, family member died in a plane crash. But the experience of being of going through that
Right. Yeah.
It's still in my mind. It's still in all of us. You cannot erase that.
No. I can only, have my condolences. I can't even imagine what that had been like to go through, the way that all went down, and to be so close with somebody like Randy, and to be able to continue to go and play where you're at today, and being now known as one of the very best that's ever played. What did it feel like, Rudy, to be inducted into the Hall of Heavy Metal History in 2017 then?
Well, it was an honor, especially because we were recognized. It was actually the first year, and that's the same year that Ronnie James Dio got inducted, my Dio bandmate.
Mm-hmm.
I was Ronnie's bass player from 2004 until he passed away. And, that's another one that I learned so much from, especially at a time when I thought, oh, I've seen everything, I've done everything. No, Ronnie just showed me a whole different level. It's not only as musicianship, but humanity and just everything about him, And also, it's just, what I consider pillars of the genre. Judas Priest, Rob Halford, Quiet Riot got inducted, Randy Rhodes got inducted, Frankie Banali got inducted. It was a very special evening. I felt that outside of myself, the Heavy Metal Hall of Fame, Hall of Memory, had actually established itself on a very strong foundation with the pillars of our community, of our genre, to create the temple.
Whenever you decide, if you ever decide to stop playing, how do you want your legacy to be remembered?
I don't know yet. I'm not done.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that you're not done. What's on the horizon for 2021 then for you?
Well, I had my first shot of the vaccine yesterday.
So you're half a vaccinated man.
Yeah, the first one. The next one, it's February 21st, and I'm beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just hope it's not a train that's not coming at me.
I do as well. I'm hoping that we're through all this, and at least by summer, maybe end of summer, we can get back to some live concerts, because not only do the people miss going to live concerts, but I know you guys as musicians, miss performing in front of a live audience.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's what we do. I mean, look, let's be realistic. I'm 70 years old. I'm going to be, in 10 years, I'm going to be 80. I mean, I feel pretty good for 70.
You don't even, honestly, you look like you're 50, maybe.
I feel better now than I did when I was 50. I don't know what I'm going to feel like, or my presence is going to be like, because I don't want to be that guy on stage. I consider that we are memory merchants. We're selling memories. We're going stage. Nobody wants to see a fat old Mick Jagger. I don't want to see a fat Mick going, "Yo, satisfaction." I don't want that. I want to see Mick, skinny Mick running around.
Right.
Keith Richards, that's another thing. Keith can do whatever, but Mick, it's got to be that, because he sells that. I see Mick performing and I go, "Holy shit, look at this guy." It's the same energy that I get from him, actually even more than that in the 60s, because in the 60s he was just kind of like standing there trying to imitate James Brown, whatever. He didn't have his mojo yet. Then he got his mojo, and that's it. I want to see Jagger with the mojo on.
I got it.
And the day that I lose my mojo, whatever that mojo is, I'm done. See ya. because I cannot go and say, it doesn't mean that I'm going to stop making music. No, I'll keep making music, but I'm just not going to be seen making the music.
You're gonna go down as one of the very best ever to play and step foot on a stage, for sure.
You know what? Thank you so much. That's extremely kind of you. But the more I learn, the more I know that there's more to learn. It's never ends, never ends.
Rudy, thanks for taking some time out of your schedule and playing and mixing and being on my show. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
For show notes, go to the website beforethelightspod.com and you can find the episodes there. Follow us on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. If you'd like to become a sponsor to the show, reach out to me on an email, beforethelightspod@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.